All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Alumni Speaker Series. We're very excited to have you. My name is Carolina Ojaj, and I'm Associate Director of Alumni Relations. Thank you, everyone who's joining us tonight. We hope that you're safe and well and enjoying these last few weeks of the summer. Before I introduce Joe, who is our illustrious guest speaker for tonight, I just wanted to touch base on some housekeeping rules. So we'll be taking questions throughout the entire session, right, Joe?
Right.
And I'll be interjecting Joe just so that he's working on two monitors right now, so one camera and the monitor separately, and I want to make sure I read him any questions that come his way. So feel free to ask any on the chat function or using the Q&A, or just by raising your hand if you want to be unmuted and ask your question in person, or as in person as we can right now, given the state of affairs. So I'm really to introduce you to Joseph Moreno, who's a friend, a double alumnus, and a supporter of our AIVDC program. Thank you for being with us tonight, Joe, and for exploring the topics of job searching and networking. He's originally from New York. He graduated from the School of Law in 1999, and in 2000 with his MBA. He's currently the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer of SAP National Security Services, and prior to that, he was a global litigation partner with Cadwalader, Wickersham, and Taft. Before private practice, he served as a federal prosecutor at the United States Department of Justice, and he was appointed to serve as part of the FBI's 9/11 Review Commission. Joe is a decorated combat veteran. He's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve and currently serves at the Army Office of General Counsel at the Pentagon, which is a mouthful. And that's just a few of his many, many accolades. He is internationally recognized. You may have seen him on TV. I have several times on BBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, and many more, where he comments on national security and law enforcement topics, and even recently, most recently, on how to homeschool his children during the pandemic. He is also joining us tonight from Northern Virginia, where he lives with his wife and 8 children. Joe, it's a real privilege to have you here, and thank you for being part of our Alumni Speaker Series.
Thanks, Carolina. That was a really nice introduction. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining and taking some time out of your busy week to listen to hopefully what is a productive use of your time over the next 30 to 45 minutes. So like Carolina said, I am a St. John's graduate. I went to Stony Brook for undergrad, but then I went to St. John's right out of college for law school and then for business school. And I graduated, hard to believe, 21 years ago now. So I would say at 45 years old, I'm mid-career. I'd say I have at least 20 more years ahead of me, if not a little more. And it's a good time to reflect on sort of, what I've accomplished so far and what I still want to do over the next 2 to 3 decades of my professional career. And we're certainly in an interesting time right now, and I think that might even be an understatement. It's an election year in a time when things are very politically charged. And so I think that always adds a bit of tension to things. The economy is a little wary about who is going to win in November. Things right here in Washington are pretty tense, especially now. So I think you have that factor coupled with the fact that we're in this coronavirus pandemic, coupled with the fact that the economy, while it's coming back slowly, is definitely nowhere near where we want it to be. Any one of those 3 things would make this a stressful time, whether you're starting off in your career, whether you're mid-career, or whether you're more advanced. People are worried. People are worried in the private sector. People are worried in the military, in the public sector about what could happen. So it's an interesting and stressful time for a lot of people. And I think that now more than ever, think about things like your network, and particularly your alumni network, and how those of us that are involved can help each other. And I think I am so blessed, I say all the time, that I chose to go to St. John's. My dad went to St. John's in the 60s, and he got his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in psychology. And so we have a history of going to the school. And I have to say, I mean, the alumni network has served me so well, starting with the very first job I got out of school. And I'll get into that in a minute about how that happened. But we really, really are part of a very special network. And so I urge you, much as you're joining today, and whether you went to St. John's or didn't, everyone is welcome, of course, tonight. But if you did go to St. John's or you're a current student, really take advantage of that network. And I mean two things by that. One is there's the official resources that are available to you, like Carolina's office, right? Alumni relations, career placement, whether you're at the law school, the business school, undergraduate, there's all kinds of official resources to help you find that first job and find subsequent jobs and network once you're in those jobs. But also there's that informal network, right? It's those people, it's those bonds that you form when you're in class that years later, those could be your colleagues, your clients, your bosses, right? Your coworkers. The relationships you form when you're in school can carry with you for decades. And I'm proof of that. I mean, I have been so blessed and so helped by professors and fellow colleagues and classmates of St. John's. And I hope that doing things like this can be the minimum that I can do to help give back. So, as Carolina said, I'll go for about 30 minutes and then we'll leave some time for questions. But if you have something you really want to respond to or you really want to ask me, please feel free to use the chat feature and Carolina will stop me and I'll try my best to address your question. But I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I grew up in Long Island. Like I said, I went to high school out in Suffolk County, right to college at Stony Brook. I finished in 3 years. I was a go-getter. I really wanted to get through college, to get right to law school. And then I went to St. John's right out of college. And so I was there 96, 97, 98, 99, right? 3 years of law school, and then a 4th year part-time to finish my MBA at the Tobin School. And so I wound up getting a law degree and an MBA with a focus in accounting because I really wanted to be a CPA as well as a lawyer. So I did those things. I took the bar exam in New York, took the CPA exam in New York, and there I was as a JD MBA accountant attorney hybrid. My first job was at PricewaterhouseCoopers because I needed to get that CPA work experience. And I got that job not through career services at the law school, but I went to a tax professor, one of my professors at St. John's, and I said, I really want to work at one of the big 5, now it's the big 4 accounting firms. And next thing I knew, she hooked me up with an alum who had graduated a few years prior. He took my resume. A few weeks later, I had an interview, second round, then I got the job for a summer internship, which turned into eventually a full-time job when I graduated. So my very first job at a big 4 consulting firm was directly due to the help of a St. John's professor and a St. John's alum. And I mention them to this day. I owe them so much to help me get that initial start. And it's really because I spoke up, right? I identified someone whose class I enjoyed, who I was respectful to, who seemed like she was approachable and my professor. And I went to her for office hours and she helped me out. And because really that's what we do for each other. And so I'll get into resume versus relationships in a few minutes, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is to start building those relationships early. So I did a year at PwC to get my accounting experience, and then I went to Skadden Arps, which is a big law firm in New York City. They hire a lot of St. John's grads. They have some pretty prominent alums that are working there as very senior partners. So I became part of a pretty nice group of St. John's alums that were at Skadden Arps. I did 5 years there, and then I went to Cadwalader, Wickersham Taft, which is the oldest law firm in the country. It's a Wall Street firm based downtown in Manhattan. And I went there because of a friend who I met in the Army. I'll tell you about my Army experience in a minute. But I did a few years at Cadwalader. I actually began as a corporate lawyer, but after a few years of doing that, I realized I really missed being on my feet and arguing and being in court. And that's what I wanted to do. So about 5 years out, I went to my bosses at Skadden and said, I want to try something else. And they let me join the white collar litigation group. And that really kind of launched my career in a different direction where I became a white collar litigator. And I focused on helping companies and some individuals who were basically being investigated by the Justice Department or the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Attorney General's office for various different white collar crimes and help them get out of it, or sometimes go to trial, or sometimes argue on appeal. And I loved it. It was great. And I really felt like I was so glad that when I saw a few years in that I wasn't loving what I was doing, I was bold enough to make a change, because I think a lot of people get in these ruts where they're afraid to make a change once they've invested a couple of years in something, and they stay in it and they stay unhappy. So for me, I always tell people, if you're not happy, find something that fulfills you in your career. Find something you can be passionate about. I mean, many people don't love their jobs, but you can find something that you get fulfillment of in your career. I firmly, firmly believe that. So what I left out was, as a first-year associate at Skadden, I decided I wanted to join the military and get some military experience. It was something I've always wanted to do. I unfortunately was not savvy about things like ROTC. So I would have done that. And of course, St. John's has a program, but I didn't know about it. And so by that time, I graduated law school, and I did some research, and I realized that the Army would allow you to direct commission as a first lieutenant into the Reserve JAG Corps. So I was able to keep my civilian job at a big law firm, but also 1 weekend a month be an Army reservist. And so I said, that sounds really cool. So after going to my boss and getting permission and dropping the application, and it all took about 6 months, I was sworn in as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserve JAG Corps in April of 2001. And sure enough, when I joined, I figured this would be a cool little part-time thing, almost like a fraternity. I'd hang out in the Reserve Center once a month and have donuts and learn some Army stuff, never thinking that 3 or 4 months later, we would have the September 11th attacks, which of course really, really changed the trajectory of my career and my life. So after the attacks, at that point, I'd been in 3 or 4 months in the Army. It became a lot more demanding, right? They needed lawyers to help soldiers deploy first to Afghanistan and then to Iraq. And then eventually they needed me to go to Iraq. So I spent a year in Germany as a prosecutor first, and then a second year in Kuwait and Iraq, also as a prosecutor. So part of my desire to change from being a corporate lawyer to a trial lawyer was really because of the fact that I was thrown into doing Army courts-martial while overseas, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. So Skadden Arps was wonderful about letting me make that change about 5 years into my career, having now spent a couple of years in the Army. And then on my third tour, which was in Djibouti in the Horn of Africa, sure enough, I worked alongside a colleague who was a Cadwalader associate, and he convinced me to change firms. Cadwalader, like I said, is an old, very established Wall Street law firm, much smaller than Skadden Arps. And so I liked the idea of still a big firm, but yet a smaller experience. And so I made that jump. Did about 3 years at Cadwalader in New York. And at this point, I'm about 10 years out of school. And I said, I'm looking around, and now I'm a white collar guy, right? So I'm 10 years out of school. I'm looking at the partners, all the people that I see around me that are successful, and I see one common trait. They've all got significant government experience. And sure, I had my couple of years in the Army and my few years by that point in the reserves, but they had all been federal prosecutors or local prosecutors. And I really felt that I needed to do that if I was going to be successful in this field, and I'm going to be a partner or going to be a general counsel someday. So at that point, I made the decision to apply for a prosecutor's job. I'd got a couple of different offers out there, one in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn that accepted me, one in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan that turned me down, unfortunately, and then one down here in Washington with what they call Main Justice in the counterterrorism section. And that really seemed appealing to me because of my military experience and the fact that national security was such a hot issue after 9/11, even 10 years later. I mean, it still is today. So I moved myself and my wife, and we had one child at the time, and moved down here about 10 years ago. It was President Obama's first month in office, coincidentally, but it was a very exciting time to be here in Washington, D.C. And I spent several years as a prosecutor, and I loved it. I loved being in the federal government. I loved being back in court. It brought me back to my Army days of being on active duty. And I really, really enjoyed every minute that I spent at the government. And then after a few years, I went back to Cadwalader, which was my plan all along. I stayed on really good terms with them. That was, a very common thing to kind of step out for a while, get that government experience, and then go back to your firm. So I did, but I stayed in the Washington office. I spent a few years as a special counsel, which is sort of an in-between role, higher than associate, but not quite a partner. And then I became a partner about 5 years ago. And it was great. I mean, it was something I'd always wanted to do. They tell us lawyers that being a partner at a law firm is what you aspire to do. And so, of course, that's what I wanted to do, to kind of, say I could do it and see if I could do it and, reach that career goal. And I did. And I was really, really grateful. And it was hard to get and it was hard to do, but it was a great, great experience, which only ended about 3 months ago with my current job. And so now what I do is I'm the general counsel of a technology company. And so SAP National Security Services, we're a 800-person company that's based in Northern Virginia. We are owned by SAP, which is a very large German software company based in Germany with 90,000 employees worldwide. And we're a wholly owned subsidiary of SAP. And we have sort of a very special mission in that we focus on sales to the US government, meaning the military and the intelligence community, other federal agencies, and the defense sector. So because of that very special national security mission, we have certain protections where we are very independent from our parent company. And we operate effectively as an American company with all American US persons based in the US. All of our employees are here in the US. And so we can tell our customers that are government agencies that we are a US company, even though we may have a foreign parent. So it's a very, very interesting legal construct. And it's been a really, really great challenge that I've enjoyed. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that whole experience. So basically what I've done is now 3 months ago, I've made this job change in the middle of a pandemic. Right? I started having this conversation with SAP, which was a client of mine back last summer. And they had said, our general counsel is looking for a successor. I had known her for years. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. She'd been a partner of mine at Cadwalader previously. And they said, we're looking for someone to kind of take on that role. And it took a while. They had to post it because they're a government contractor and they have rules and they had to look at a certain number of candidates. So I couldn't just assume the job was mine. And because it took a while, I said, you know what? I'm going to do what I've never done before, which is to really also kind of look at my prospects, because I'd always kind of rolled from one job to another, right? I mean, I had that first job at PwC because that professor at St. John's helped me. And then my second job at SAP NS2’s, it was from my summer mentor at PwC who had made the jump, who then helped me make the jump a year later. Then at Cadwalader, it was my friend who I met in the Army. In fact, of the 5 jobs that I've had in the 21 years I'm practicing, only one, which was my Department of Justice job, was a cold resume. The other 4 were all through relationships. And that's not, and I don't mean by that like my dad knew the head of the company. I'm talking about the fact that I had forged those relationships. First, it was the professor at St. John's. Then it was my summer mentor at PwC. Then it was my buddy in the Army. Then it was my relationship to go back to Cadwalader after my government service. And then sure enough, my current job, it's because I had a relationship with the company because I was one of their outside lawyers. And so they knew my work and they knew me. And I had spent several years as outside counsel building that relationship with the CEO and the CFO and the outgoing general counsel. So I had that goodwill built up there. And it goes to something that I've reflected on for a long time. There was definitely a point in my career early on where I felt that if I just reached a certain threshold, the floodgates would open and opportunities would just be coming to me. I thought at first, maybe when I got to that first big law firm at SAP NS2’s, okay, now I'm in big law, which is what these lawyers aspire to. And now I'll be golden. And then when I served overseas, now I'm a veteran and I've got a bronze star. And that'll make me, everybody will want to hire me. And then I was a federal prosecutor. And then I was a special counsel. Then I was a partner at a law firm. And I kept thinking, gosh, if I just hit that level, then the road will open up and things will just kind of like opportunities will come flying at me. And I got to say, it doesn't always work that way. And maybe it does for some people. Maybe if you're a Supreme Court clerk or if you went to Harvard, I don't know. But for me, every one of these has been through relationship building and hard work. And frankly, even as the general counsel, as the top lawyer of a company, I still have no illusions that I'm just going to have future jobs thrown at me, I'm going to have to work for every one of those. And so I think that's a reality that, at least in my experience, that's been the way it is. And the way, like I said, the way almost always it's been done is through relationships. And so doing this job search over the past year, because again, I couldn't count on this job, right? It wasn't mine until it was in hand. So I looked around. I said, okay, I've never had to do this. So let me take a look at other firms, other companies, maybe even non-lawyer jobs like lobbying or government relations, which of course are really big down here in Washington. And so it made me realize a few things. One is that a resume is really important, but there's a limit to what a resume alone can get you, right? You can have the best credentials, the best grades, the best references, and yet if you're just kind of shooting that resume into the dark, it's going to get filtered, whether it's by people who don't know you or by bots and AI, which many companies use now, where your resume is filtered and never even gets to a human being. And so even when you have really great credentials, there's nothing like having a person that can take your resume and make sure it gets a good look. Doesn't mean you're going to guarantee to get the job, but it really, really enhances your potential to at least get an interview if you have some personal connection with the company or the firm or even the government agency that you're hoping to hire you. And so I kind of knew that years ago when I was just starting in my career, but now 20 years in, it reaffirmed it. And I sent out a bunch of resumes and different LinkedIn postings and different other job board postings just to kind of see what would happen. Some of these things I was really overqualified for, and yet I got rejected by almost all of them. And I'm like, gosh, I can do this job. I've been a partner at a law firm. I've done all these great things. But I know that my resume wasn't even being seen by anyone because I didn't have a personal connection to reach out to. So it was an interesting test experience. And I'm not saying don't try these things, because there's different stages in your career where those postings might be much more accessible. But I do feel stronger than ever that nothing beats having those relationships, right? No amount of great credentials, a great resume, a great cover photo, nothing like that beats knowing live people who are willing to kind of stick their neck out for you because they know and they trust you. Social media is another one. So if for those of you who know me, and Carolina knows this, I have had for years now a pretty good social media presence. And part of that is driven by the fact that I was a partner at a law firm, and my number one job there was to get clients, right? So I was basically selling. I was selling myself, I was selling the team, and I was selling the firm. That if you have a white collar problem, right? If you have an employee who's been indicted, or if the SEC has come knocking and you've gotten a subpoena from a government agency, you can trust me to get you or your company through that ordeal because I've seen it and I've done it and I know what it's like on the other side. And I'm a trusted, knowledgeable Washington, D.C. lawyer. So I'm building this profile. So I'm speaking, I'm going on television, I'm writing articles, and yeah, I'm posting a lot on social media. My conclusion after doing that for several years is I think it's worth it and I think it's fun. But for me, my conclusion was LinkedIn postings, Facebook postings, Twitter, writing, those are means, but they're not the end itself. I mean, unless you think you're going to be a YouTuber and make money from actually going online, the purpose of doing all that is, I believe, still to meet people. So if I blast out a LinkedIn posting because I've written a really great article and I get thousands of looks and I get a bunch of thumbs up, that's great. And it's fun and it's cool to track it and you feel cool and you can Google yourself and that's all fun. But for me, having done it hundreds of times, it's only really worth it if real people are reading what you're doing and interacting with you because you've piqued someone's interest, or because someone notes something that you've written and then you follow up with them with the goal of really trying to make a connection with someone. It doesn't mean you're going to be best friends or they're going to hire you right away. But if you can have some kind of a back and forth, you can establish yourself as a resource to them. You can do something for them. You can add value for them. That's what can start the foundation to then actually lead to perhaps a job or a client or perhaps just a friendship. So for me, social media is great. I do it a lot less now that I'm in-house, and I'll talk about kind of why that is. But for me, putting aside the fun part of it, I think you also have to kind of keep it in perspective in that there's a limit to how far you can go on social media when it comes to real career development. So, so my new job. So what do I do now as the general counsel of a software company? It's a lot of fun. So as a law firm partner, like I said, I was really a salesperson, right? I was out there trying to get clients. When I got clients, then of course my job was to get them through a crisis. And so oftentimes it was some kind of white collar problem. Maybe it was a tax issue, insider trading, foreign bribery, money laundering, right? All the kinds of things that I investigated when I was a federal prosecutor. Now I was on the other side, helping a company stay out of trouble. Maybe they were under investigation. Maybe they were just worried about an investigation because they'd found something internally, like perhaps in an audit. And I was helping them build their compliance program. I was helping them investigate something internally, figuring out if someone had to be disciplined or fired, or if something had to be disclosed to the government. It was great, but it was narrow, right? I mean, I'm doing a very specific area of law. I didn't do tax. I didn't do corporate. I didn't do mergers and acquisitions. I did white collar litigation. And it's a great way to become an expert in a very specific area of law. However, I always felt I wanted to be more of a generalist, more of a business lawyer and advisor. And that's why I got my MBA at St. John's 20 years ago. And so I felt like, gosh, if I have an opportunity to do that, let's take that opportunity. And so now I am the go-to lawyer for every legal issue that comes in the door. It could be something from the government, God forbid, hopefully that doesn't happen. It could be because an employee is angry and is threatening to sue us because of something that he or she felt mistreated about. It could be something about a patent, about a software product that we developed that we want to make sure we protect properly so people can't steal our intellectual property. It could be a contract dispute because I own the contracts department as well as legal and compliance. It could be developing new compliance controls and policies because we're entering a new market or developing a new product and we have to make sure we're covered legally and compliance-wise. So it's much more of a generalist legal position than what I had as a partner at a firm, where basically I would be hired for a very specific reason. I would get the client through that issue, whatever it was, and then odds are I'd never see them again because I got them through it. This is different. I have basically one client, which is the company, all 800 persons that comprise the company. So it's really, really a fun endeavor. I'm also finding myself as much a legal advisor, also a business advisor, because lawyers do come with a certain perception, a certain perspective on things. And so I will find that very often I'm asked questions that aren't really legal, but where I can bring a certain perspective coupled with the finance people and the sales people and the marketing folks and HR, and really kind of be a piece of that pie and lend my perception to whether it's when should we reopen our offices because of the coronavirus? Should we have any kind of social or business activities now, or should we be 100% remote? Things like public relations, right? I mean, I've done a lot of PR in the past, so I'll get asked questions about something and I'll say, well, it's not really a legal question, but I'm happy to give my opinion about whether we should do that or we shouldn't do that, or this issue is a little too political, let's stay away from that. So I'll find myself involved in a lot more than just the legal portion of the company, and it's really exciting. And it's a very different experience than it was being a law firm attorney. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but certainly I've really enjoyed my experience these last 3 months at SAP, much as I enjoyed my near 12 years at Cadwalader before and after my federal government experience. So it's definitely interesting. Now, of course, I've onboarded entirely remotely. We are working from home at least through the end of the calendar year, possibly into 2021. I have never been to the office, which is about 30 miles from where I live in Herndon, Virginia, other than when I visited as outside counsel and when I interviewed there back in January. So I have 12 people who report to me who I have never met in person, only through video, through Teams and Zoom. Some of whom don't particularly like going on camera, so I don't even get to see them. They're basically a voice to me. So I have 12 people, actually two slots are open, so I have 10 people currently who I have to manage, and I've never really been a manager before, right? I mean, it's a little different as a law firm partner. But each one of those people have their own concerns about their future, about the stability of their job, about whether or not they're doing a good job, whether about what's the new boss like, right? I'm gauging them, they're gauging me. They don't know me. They don't know what kind of person I am. So it's another unique challenge. And from my perspective coming in, it's been great for me because I'm coming in at a very senior level, right? I report to the CEO. I sit shoulder to shoulder with the chief financial officer, the head of HR, the head of marketing. So I'm coming in at a fairly senior level, and it's got its challenges, but I'm coming in very plugged into senior management. If I was very junior in my career, just starting in an environment like this remotely, I can understand that can be really, really challenging. And I can see that from the perspective of the folks that I manage, some of whom are, well, I have both lawyers and non-lawyers, some of whom are just a few years out of college. And I can see that it's a challenge for them, and it's a challenge for all of us. And so what I'm trying to do is a couple of things. One is every single day, every single work day, I try to meet at least one new person at the company, right? I mean, we have 800 people here. About half of them are in the Northern Virginia area. The other half are scattered between Pennsylvania, Florida, and the rest of the country. So I try to make a new connection, and I mean either an email or a Teams video chat every day. I try to meet one more person because even though I work for the CEO, I consider myself the lawyer for the entire company. Right? Anyone in the company can come to me or my department with a question about the law or compliance or contracts for that matter. And my job is to advise them. So I'm not their personal lawyer, I'm the company's lawyer, but I feel like I serve everyone here. And so for me, I feel like both top down and bottom up, I really am determined to build strong relationships because I will only be effective at this job if I earn the trust of everyone, senior management to the most junior people. Ordinarily, I would do this by walking through the building and meeting people, right? I mean, I'm a social guy. I like getting coffee. I like getting beers. I like walking down the hallways and chatting with people, whether they're on my team or on different teams. We can't do that now. So I'm compensating by that one contact a day rule, and I'm really, really trying to stick to it. Another thing I'm doing is I'm trying to have both short and long-term goals for myself, right, at this new job. It's the kind of job where, again, I'm learning everything new here. I'm learning our products, I'm learning our markets, I'm learning different areas of law that I was not previously exposed to. So all this stuff is coming in. I'm dealing with the management side of things, the substantive side of things, and it's a busy, busy job. And my day is very typically filled with calls and chats and video conferences. So when it's 5 o'clock, it's very tempting for me to say, you know what, I'm done. And I may have accomplished the short-term things that have come in that day, and I might be all caught up, but I know there are some long-term goals that I really want to accomplish. And they're different than the kinds of goals I had as a law firm partner. That was all about getting clients and getting revenue, right? It was very, very quantitative. I knew what my targets were. I knew where I was at first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and year end. Either I met those targets and I'd get rewarded, or I would not meet those targets and I would not get rewarded. It was very, very easy to measure my success. Here it's different, right? I mean, I don't have that sales aspect of what I do. So it's Am I giving quality advice to people, from everyone from the CEO down to the junior contracts person? Am I getting back to people quickly? And also, am I doing the kinds of structural changes that I want to make my mark as the company's new general counsel, right? I see some areas where I believe I could improve some efficiencies. I see some policies that I'd like to change. But those are longer term goals, right? It takes time to do things like that. And so for me, I want to make sure I have my short term goals, meaning my everyday back and forth things done. And I want to make sure that when I have a list of 3 or 4 or 5 long term goals, I have deadlines and I hold myself to those deadlines, because especially in this remote environment, I think it's very easy to let those kinds of things slip. And then the third thing is, and it's this advice I give everyone, whether it's your first job or your most senior position, try to find a mentor, right? Even at my level. For me, thank goodness, the general counsel that I replaced is actually still here in sort of a senior consulting strategy role. So I still have the benefit of her knowledge, and she's been here 5 years. So I speak to her 2 or 3 times a day, asking what I think are even the dumb questions, because there are no dumb questions. So I had the benefit of a mentor. And I recommend that wherever you are in your career, whether it's someone who's formally appointed to you by your company or someone you find informally, you really try to have that one go-to person that you can be honest with. You can say, hey, let me get a sanity check on this. Let me run this situation by you. Maybe it's on the substance. Maybe it's on office politics. Maybe it's on someone to say, you know what, look at my work product and would you mind giving me your honest opinion? Or I had this interaction with someone, I wasn't sure how it went. Can I run it past you? Someone who knows the politics and who knows the firm or the company. I think it's really, really valuable. The times when I've struggled the most in my career is when I lost that mentor for whatever reason. And those are the times I realized, like, wow, had I had some advice or some guidance, I may have done things a little differently and things might have gone a little, in a different direction. So for me, I always recommend you try to find that person. And if you can't find that person at the company, then have an external mentor, but someone that you can honestly relate to, that and whose advice you trust. And then the last issue I'll touch on is sort of professional development, because I'm a firm believer that you should never stop developing your career, right? That resume that I had not used in so many years and I dusted off this past year, it's so important to keep developing that. And that's another area, and especially I think us lawyers are the biggest culprits, because we graduate law school, we take the bar, and then the vast majority of us will never ever get another degree again, right? We'll do continuing education, and there are some certifications and things you can get, but most of us never get a more advanced degree. And so you could have a 30 or 40-year career after that, and you've never had another formal degree. Some folks go back and get MBAs. Some folks get an LLM, which is an advanced law degree, which is a great degree. For me, I probably will not get another degree. I have the MBA. And for me, because I do have 8 kids and I am in the reserves and I do have an intense job, so I'm determined because of that to pursue some professional certifications. And I'm at a company now that will actually pay for those kinds of things. So I'm the first one to say, if there are opportunities to update your resume, build your skill set, even if you don't need to do it, you should always be thinking about, how can I do that? So for me, I have 2 certifications that I'm intent on getting between now and the end of the year. They're both cybersecurity data privacy certifications issued by an organization called the International Association of Privacy Professionals, because cybersecurity is a big part of my job. So for me, that's my goal. I plan to meet it. Thankfully, I'm at a company that's supportive, that will pay for me to do those things. And I suggest to everyone on my team, whether it's contracts or compliance or law, they should all be pursuing those things. And so I feel like that's really, really important. Another thing I'm doing, aside from connecting with one colleague at SAP every day, I am connecting with either a new contact or reconnecting with an existing contact every day. That could be a call to a friend of mine who's a lawyer at another firm or a company, or in the government still or in the army. But I feel like in this age of COVID, when I'm not out there having coffees and getting beers after work and doing television hits and meeting new folks, it's very easy to get caught in this office 12, 14 hours a day and not have that contact. So for me, I'm also really, really making that a goal of mine. I don't always succeed. I don't always do it, but that's my goal, is that I'm meeting not just one new SAP person every day, but I'm connecting or reconnecting with an existing or new contact every day. And that's really something I think is so, so important, especially now. So with that, I've spoken for a while, and I'd love to address any questions if anyone has anything or a comment on anything I've said, or a question or a clarification you're looking for.
Joe, thank you so much. This was absolutely amazing. You mentioned that you were not only a legal advisor, a business advisor, but now you can also add career advisor to that resume. Very extensive and impressive resume of yours. I'd love to get us started off with a question that came in through fellow alumnus from DC, Joseph Moreno, also previous panelist for the series, good friend of ours. Shout out to Joe. He said, I find it very odd that you have some people who don't want to be on camera. Is it because of the location they're broadcasting from? Is it because they want to stay in their t-shirts and sweats? Do they do this on one-on-one chats also?
Yeah, Joe, that's a great, so hey, Joe, great to hear from you, my friend. That's an interesting one. And it's actually led to some pretty extensive conversations at the highest levels of the company about etiquette in this new era of Zoom and Teams, about whether or not you should have your camera on. And one of our business unit leaders addressed our intern class a few weeks ago. We have about 25 interns, all remote because of the time we're in. So they're scattered all over the Northeast, working from home. And he began his talk with only 8 out of 25 people who are viewable on their own cameras. And he made a comment like, I'd love to see some more of you. Then he goes into his 45-minute spiel, asks if there was any questions, and looks down, and how many cameras are turned on? Still the same 8 cameras. And he was really taken aback. And this kind of led to a whole conversation about, is it polite to be on camera, or should you allow the person the option? Because maybe they're working out of a studio apartment, or maybe they're interns in their parents' homes, and they are sensitive about the background that they're in. Or maybe it's because this might be more for women than men, but I've gotten this feedback from my team that hair, makeup, and stuff is tougher, and for them it's more efficient just to kind of get right to it. And if they don't have to deal with the video aspect of things, because let's face it, we can do most things audio only. The video is more of a courtesy. They feel so people have some pretty strong opinions about this. From my perspective, after we had this conversation at the highest level, I did tell my team, like, look, I'm a firm believer in kind of being really open. So if I say I don't mind if you join, I mean it. I don't mind. If I do want someone to be on camera for whatever reason, let's say we're speaking with a customer or another firm, and we're trying to have something more of a professional contact, I'll tell my people in advance, I'd really like you on video this time. But it's definitely been a really interesting issue to deal with that I feel like just 6 months ago, I never would have thought that camera etiquette was something we'd be discussing, but it certainly is.
It's a very, very fair point, Joe. I believe that Vivian would like to ask us a question. Vivian, I'm going to unmute you right now.
Thank you. Hi, I graduated from St. John's with a doctorate in education, and your advice about meeting people and staying in touch, if it wasn't for Dr. Rita Dunn, who was my professor, and others who were superintendents and principals that I met at St. John's, I wouldn't have gotten as far as I did. I am now retired, but I'd like to get back in to teaching teachers. I am selling my place here in Florida and going back up to Connecticut, and hopefully I'll be able to get some kind of an adjunct position where I graduated from WestConn or some other university in the area. What advice could Joe give me to make myself more visible and more ready to serve?
I think that's, I mean, great question, and what a great career. I mean, I would say reconnect with those schools, right? I mean, reconnect with the alumni offices, and show your interest. And maybe one, I think you probably could do some work already remotely, because it's such a trend now to be able to do things. So even before you make the move from Florida back to the Northeast, you probably
Yes.
could already maybe be, serve as a volunteer or provide some career guidance for people as a first step toward getting that adjunct position. So I would say, jump right in and use technology, and don't necessarily wait until you physically have moved.
I will say that I am on the advisory of Delray schools, and I do what I can. I also go to schools and work with kids and teachers. And I am going to take your advice, because the person who I serve, I'm going to ask for a recommendation for my resume, because I've been on that advisory board for now about 4 or 5 years.
Definitely. And that's a good point too, about like volunteer service is another great way. It really is a great way to build those relationships and build that trust. And, for me, the Army has been a great source of just networking with a whole other body of lawyers that I would not have met in big law.
Right.
And I think other volunteer service, I'm on the board of alumni at Stony Brook. I do a lot of work for St. John's. And so I think those kinds of relationships, people that you've built trust with, then when you need something, whether it's a job or a reference, or a client, like I was in the client getting business for years, those people are more inclined to say, sure, I'll give you a chance, or I'll give you a reference, or I'll try to give you a job, because they know you and they trust you. And so I think that's a great point.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Vivian. Also, just wanted to say, moving from one Joe to another, Joe Barone is a teacher who teaches teachers, and he has a lot of experience. Specifically, he worked at the World Bank for many, many years. He has his own consulting business, so I definitely recommend checking him out on LinkedIn, on his website, and connecting with him. He'd be a great resource.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And he's on the call, so he's here too. Any more questions? Again, just make sure to raise your hands or write it on the Q&A chat so I can read it out to Joe. But in the meantime, Joe, I have a question for you. So you have extensive experience, not only being a veteran, having been part of public service, and in the private sector too. So you've done a lot. What now is the next step for you? You're very big on creating personal goals, not only professionally, but personally as well. And I was wondering, maybe now that you're in DC, you have this extensive background, like, would you consider moving into another field, maybe jumping into politics? Like, what is the next step for you?
So I do have to admit that, yes, part of my draw to being in DC is that I do have a passion for government, and I would love to see myself more active in government at the right time. So yes, I definitely like the fact that I'm 5 miles from the Capitol and the White House. And part of what I've tried to do here in DC over the past decade is to start building those kinds of connections on Capitol Hill, and in the executive branch and at the Pentagon, to have a portfolio of people that I know. And so, yes, for me, it's definitely a very conscious choice. Even though I miss New York, I really do, and I love New York City, and I love going there for work when I have to. But I mean, I chose to be here for a very specific reason. And so, and I suggest, if you have that kind of passion for something, you set those long-term goals, right? So it's not just about where you want to be next year or 5 years from now, but like even 10 or 20 years from now. So I don't think I'm going to run for office, in the next decade, but maybe in next decade, maybe when I'm in my mid-50s. But I'm trying to lay the groundwork now, get a little politically involved, do some media work, right? Build those connections. So at the right time, if it makes sense for me and my family, maybe that's the next thing.
That's a great answer, Joe. Very, very politically correct answer too. Very exactly what we'd expect. We've seen you on TV. You're a natural. You would do very well in whatever next steps come your way. And politics seems like a very natural move for you. So that's exciting to hear.
Thanks.
Camille, I still see you with your raised hand. I'm not sure if that was from earlier or if you have a question that you'd like to ask. And Joe, in the meantime, while we wait around, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn is great for that. So I mean, you know, I will connect with you if you have, as long as you have a good looking, you know, a profile that has like a proper name, a title, a picture is preferable. I'll accept. You do get some sketchy, you know, people that reach out to you. So I will screen if it's like a person that clearly has no profile. But if you know, if you have a real name and certainly if I see a St. John's connection, I will connect with you. You'll have my email address, even my phone number, I think, and use it. I mean, reach out to me. I'll help anyone, but I'll really go out of my way for a St. John's alum, right? I mean, there is that special bond there. So please don't hesitate. I mean, get me on LinkedIn Messenger, you know, email me. We'll find a time to chat. It's easy to chat now, right? Because we are remote. So setting up a Zoom call is pretty simple these days. And I'll always do what I can. I mean, right? Whether it's, even if I can't help you get a job directly, and maybe I can, or maybe it's just I know someone who could help you, or maybe it's just some advice or looking at someone's resume. I'm happy to do that. Others have done that for me, and so the least I can do is to kind of pay it forward.
Absolutely. Nicole Mills, I think you have a question. I'm going to unmute you right now.
Hi, Joe. So thank you so much for doing this series. I've been out of it. I'm not an attorney. I'm a paralegal, and I got my degree from St. John's, of course. And as a mom, like I said, I've been away from the arena for a while. I love your energy, and I was just wondering if you would consider being a mentor, possibly.
I would be honored. I'd be honored, Nicole. Of course, I'd be happy to. Yes, I mean, I work with a lot of paralegals, right? I've worked with paralegals in the Army, in the government, at the firm. And so I have a pretty good sense of the paralegals' career trajectory. And so I'm happy to help, sure.
Thank you. I'll be in touch with you.
I actually left out one of my most important developments, which is that I met my wife in the Army. And she was a paralegal in the Army, and so we were assigned to the same unit, and then we were deployed to Iraq together, and then a few years later we got married. So just to show you, not only did joining the reserves, you know, add a whole bunch of active duty Army experience post 9/11, but I also met my wife that way. So you know, again, I'm a firm believer in like looking for opportunities all the time. I mean, I've never thought that I would get ahead because I am the richest or best connected or even the smartest person, but I work hard and I volunteer for everything and I look for opportunities all the time. And so for me, and I still do, I mean, I could really, even in this current job, don't tell anyone who I work with, I mean, I could work like 9 to 5 and stop, right? I really could. And you know, there's no FaceTime because we're all home now. So you can log off and that's it. But I know I'm not going to get ahead, and I'm not going to gain the trust of the board of directors and the CEO by doing the bare minimum, right? I know that. And so I feel like once you start coasting is when you start like slipping back. So for me, and you can go too far. I mean, my wife will tell you, sometimes I work too much and you have to know when to balance, certainly. But that's always been my philosophy, is always look for opportunity to better yourself. Both in your current position and in the future.
Thanks, Joe. The idea of as you reach up, you reach back out is so powerful. And it means a lot to know that you are continuing to give back as a mentor, even now, like at a very developed stage in your career. We have a couple more questions. You were talking about work-life balance, and I just want to make sure that we're still good for time for at least another 5 minutes. Would that be okay? Great. Mr. Baker.
Actually, it's his wife. But
Hello, Rita.
hi. My sound wasn't working on my computer. So any thoughts for somebody looking to potentially change like industries completely, like, or you know, like I work, I guess, in like one field and changing over to a completely different field.
I mean, um, I, I think it's always possible. I mean, I made a pretty radical change. Now, I stayed within the law, but I went from being a corporate lawyer to being a white collar litigator, right? And that was 3 to 4 years out of school. And there's a risk there, right? I mean, there's a risk of losing seniority, of sort of losing the time. But for me, I'm so glad I did it. And so I would say if you're passionate about changing, pursue that. Because I think you will be happier. I think happiness and money will follow if you are more content, even if it means taking a half step back in the short term. So I think you find your way to bridge that gap, find a way to identify the skills that you think transfer, and then be ready to sell that. And be ready with a story too. And I don't mean like a made up story. I mean like a real narrative about why you want to make that change. And I gotta tell you, I was turned down for a federal prosecutor's job in Manhattan. It was the SDNY. It's a very elite office, hard to get into. But I remember they were skeptical because at that point, I'd spent 4 years as a corporate lawyer and only maybe 2 or 3 as a litigator. And one of them asked me, how can we be sure that you are really serious about this change? So I got that skepticism from at least one place. I remember that very well. And so I'm like, gosh, yeah, I mean, I do seem like I jumped. But in the long term, it was so worth it. So I would say, do it and think about when you get that question, why are you making this change? Have an answer. Maybe it's because of an interest. Don't be negative about your old career. Turn it into a positive, right? I mean, I learned from doing this that I'm really good at that. And I want to pursue that. And I feel like I could do more of that in this new role or in this new industry. You know, I mean, I've known people that have gone from being lawyers to being nurses, right? People that have gone from being accountants to being EMTs. And I say, like, God bless, like, do that if that's what makes you happy. And the money and that sort of stuff will follow.
Thank you very much.
Brett Cook, you're up next.
Hello, Joe. This is Brett Cook. I'm not sure if you remember me, but you and I spoke a few months ago when I was transitioning from the Navy JAG. You gave me some great career advice, and I really appreciate you taking time to speak with me. I'm now working in compliance at a large financial institution, and I wanted to ask you about finding a mentor. Like you, I transitioned during COVID, so I've never been to the office. I have no idea what my boss looks like. I have no idea what my coworkers look like. I feel like I'm by myself, and I'm struggling to find a mentor connection. Do you have any recommendations?
Well, I mean, Brett, great talking to you again. I'm so glad that you made that transition, and I get it. I mean, I get it, like feeling a little isolated, right? Working remotely and not meeting folks. I would say if it's not obvious to you internally because they haven't assigned you a mentor, or it's not like there's not a natural go-to person, or maybe you don't want someone internal, maybe you want someone a little removed, right, that you can sort of be open with, that's not at the same institution. Go to LinkedIn, start with me, and look to see if either I or someone I know you think could help. And you have, I mean, I've said the St. John's alumni is a very strong network. The military is also a very strong network, right? I mean, I will always go out of my way, particularly for someone who's military, usually Army, but I don't hold it against you that you were the Navy.
I appreciate that.
I'm kidding. But, right, so I mean, that gives you an introduction to people that ordinarily might be like, yeah, I don't want to, you know, I don't have time for that. But all right, I know someone who I served with, or at least served in the same branch as me. Yeah, I'll make time for that person. So I would say, and that's where I think LinkedIn can be very powerful in the feature and where you can see not just your contacts, but if it's activated properly, their contacts. And so I've used that. Like if I want to meet someone at, I don't know, like Coca-Cola, because I have an idea about, or I want to meet like the veteran coordinator at Coca-Cola, so I have some idea about something to pursue with them, I'm not really going to like call the main office or start like hunting around Google, but I'll look on LinkedIn to see if I know anyone who directly or indirectly works at Coca-Cola, right? And oftentimes with a little sleuthing, I can find someone who at least can say, you know what, I can put you in touch with this person who might be able to help you. So anyway, I think that's a great feature, and I strongly suggest, you know, using that. But it's great talking to you, Brett. And please, like, reach out to me and let me see if I can help you, please.
I will. Thanks, Joe.
Good.
LinkedIn's certainly a wonderful web. It's great for connection, especially now, as you mentioned, where it's more needed than ever. And it's also harder than ever in some ways. I didn't take it totally seriously in about 5 years ago. But I mean, I am now a big proponent. You don't have to spend every day on it, but I am a big proponent of having a good looking picture, even if it means spending $150 and going to a photographer and getting a proper picture. It's really important. Having your name spelled out properly, having a current job, even if you're a student, put that there, right? And spend a few hours building a professional profile. You don't need to pay for it. Honestly, the premium feature doesn't give you a whole lot of value. I don't necessarily recommend that you do that unless you really want to, but I do recommend take the time. And if you have the time, also post things, right? Share things, like whether it's original content or whether it's just an event you're doing or a sharp photo of an event that you're doing. Because I think it can pay off in terms of building that network, especially right now. Also, be careful about Facebook and Twitter. I mean, I see those as more social and they're great, but don't be so quick to mix one with the other. Facebook I see as much more private because I can tell you employers look there. So don't put anything on Facebook that you don't expect someone to see regardless of the privacy features. Whereas LinkedIn, you expect that to be public. So put your best face forward on LinkedIn, certainly. Thanks, Joe. We have one more question from Vincent Shipe. I hope I'm saying your name right. So I'm going to unmute you right now.
Yes, you did say my name right.
Yes.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for doing this. I'm going to try and keep this brief. I'm actually an incoming freshman for the class of 2024. And the question I had was, what great ways for someone in my position to start building those relationships early and to be able to forge those kinds of bonds that can help so much down the line?
Hey, Vincent. Great talking to you. Vincent is my middle name. It was my grandfather's name. I'm a big fan of internships. I think, especially for me, I went right from high school to college and then right from college to law school. So I didn't have any significant work experience. So I had to lean hard on internships, and they can be great. And in college, I interned at the Suffolk County Legislature. In law school, I interned at the Securities and Exchange Commission in Philly for a summer, and then at the IRS out in Westbury for a semester. So I had, even though I didn't have years of full-time work experience, I had references and I had bullets on my resume of like real, some work, even if it was just a few months, and people that would actually, I could give a phone number and have, whether it was the legislator that I worked for or the attorneys at the IRS or the SEC. So for me, I think if you get an internship, usually you're not going to get paid. So I mean, you have to kind of accept it as volunteer service, but that can go a long way in terms of learning stuff, meeting people, and having something on your resume. So I'm a big fan of that. And especially now with the economy a little shaky, companies are into hiring people for free. So if you can do it, and if you can volunteer, and if you can intern or for minimal pay, if you can swing it, and in New York, there's a lot of opportunities. Those are great ways of really building that resume when you've been really a full-time student your whole life.
Thank you so much. That's really great advice. I'll definitely take it. I'll definitely take the advice.
Thanks, Vincent. And thank you for joining us as a freshman. It's so impressive to see you even just joining us today for an alumni program at a new university is really impressive.
Agreed.
So that's really awesome. Before we close out, there's one comment that came up from Kay Echelonu, who says, I'm not a St. John's alum, but I followed Joe on LinkedIn, and I'm very inspired by his bio and enthusiasm. A big thank you to the host and the presenter. I'm very encouraged and inspired by the example. So it seems like you have a legion of fans everywhere, Joe. They're following you wherever you go. It was really great.
That's really nice. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful, wonderful compliment. And I thank you for that.
Joe, thank you so much for your time, for your advice, for your kindness, for always supporting St. John's, and for being a great representative of our school and just in general, a fantastic person. Really appreciate your time tonight. And I know everyone had an amazing experience listening to you. This will become available. This recording will be available on our website very soon. I'll share it with everyone. And if you want to join us at more events, you can join us at stjohns.edu/alumni events. We have a really cool calendar coming up for the fall. Lots of good things on the schedule. So excited to share that with you when the time comes. And again, Joe, thank you for everything. Really, really proud of who you are and all that you do for us.
Thanks, Carolina. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your kind words. And thank you so much for joining, everybody. And Vincent, I agree. Great start for you as a freshman to be doing something like this. That's good planning. But thank you all so much for your questions and your comments and for spending this hour with me. And please, if we're not already connected, link up with me, reach out to me. I will do anything. I can't promise I'll get back to you within a day. Sometimes it takes me a few days or even a few weeks, but bear with me. I will get back to you and I'll do whatever I can to help you. So please stay safe and God bless. And thanks so much for having me tonight.
Thank you, Joe. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.